Hello, welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast inspired by the condition known as tuberous sclerosis complex. My name is Jill Woodworth, and I am your host. We are also the source cannabinoids. Thanks so much for tuning in. My guests on the podcast today are two individuals. They have a entrepreneur business called OP Innovates. They formulate with the plant in mind using research experience, unique patent-pending delivery method, deliver cannabinoid products that work every time. Dr. Jim Kane is the Chief Science Officer. He has 50 years pharmaceutical experience, a Ph.D. in microbiology. Dr. Kane leads this team in research and development. And Keith Butler, the Chief Executive Officer. Keith has 40 plus years serving the cannabis industry and 20 years developing consumer products. He leads formulations. So this team, together with a few other outstanding individuals, make up OP Innovates, and Dr. Jim and Keith talked to me about getting this business started, about how each of them got into the business. Keith, like I said, has a long history. He considers himself, and he is, a steward of the plant. He has a lot of passion and purpose behind his work. Dr. Kane does as well. He came to understand and embrace cannabinoid medicine rather late, kind of like myself, and resistant to it for a while with his deep knowledge within traditional medicine and the work he was doing in other parts of his career. So it took him a little while to come around when he discovered the science that was out there. He embraced it fully and has used it himself, experienced great results. These guys focus on a lot of educating around cannabinoid medicine and using cannabis for so many reasons, putting out their exceptional product. They grow their own hemp, and they talk a little bit about that. It's a good look at what it takes to get a business off the ground with exceptional leadership and people working together. So I'm not going to talk much more about that. I do want to tell you about a few things coming up on the podcast. We're doing TSC Talks weekly updates. So every week I'm going to do about 15 minutes live on Facebook. For now, I'm going to stay on Facebook. I may merge over to Instagram. Not sure. We'll see who watches, if it's working. I'm going to give some updates on the podcasts that we have in the past, that we've done, in the present, what's on the podcast, and in the future. I will answer questions. I will talk a little bit about philosophy, and we may have guests pop in. We're trying to make it fun, lighthearted. You can ask questions, give feedback. We're just trying to make it a place that we are available every week, and we're updating everyone with what's going on, raining down on you with positivity and love. That's what we're doing. So I'm going to stop talking, say thanks again to OP Innovates, Dr. Jim, and Keith, take it away. Thank you to both of you for being on TSC Talks. I have Dr. Jim Kane and Keith Butler, and you guys are from OP Innovates.
We are.
Yes, we are.
And I'm not sure how I think I bumped into you through John Goulding. I think that was who.
John has been with us for years, actually. Yeah. And John is a true steward of the plant. He's out there working hard every day, trying to bring the good news forward.
Yeah, he did a good job. He popped up and he was like, you've got to talk to these people. So here you guys are. And Keith, you have a background in the industry. You've been like 30, 40 years in the cannabis industry. Is that correct?
I have.
And Dr. Kane, Jim,
yes.
You are a microbiologist. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And you're a pharmacist?
No, actually, it's a PhD degree I have. So I'm a research scientist.
Research scientist. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. So, thanks, guys, for being on. And I'm just going to ask you to each tell me a little bit about, just give me a short bio, whoever wants to start.
I was thinking I should go first because
Sure.
It kind of flows in that direction. I'm a dedicated steward of the plant, and I also consider myself a servant because many times it makes me do things I can't imagine I would have done, like driving till 3:30 in the morning last night.
Wow.
But basically, I was introduced to the plant at a very young age in the legalized DC movement, which was called the smoke-in, where starting in 1971, a group of people who were of like-minded consciousness stood in front of the White House and started smoking cannabis in front of the White House on July 4th. protesting the Controlled Substance Act and Richard Nixon's creation of it.
Wow.
It was a pretty amazing thing. One of the guys on our team was there in 1971. I joined in 79.
Okay.
I was a late 14-year-old when I was introduced to it. And the guy who promoted it turns out to, after all this time, to be called the father or the godfather of the cannabis industry. His name was Steve D'Angelo.
Okay, Steve,
and went on to create the Harbor Side and many, many wonderful things in the industry. He's been a pioneer extraordinaire. So he was the promoter of that. And I met him at a young age. And in the 90s, there was a company called Ecolution, which he started. Him, his brother, and Eric from Vote Hemp started a company that was based on hemp clothing. And I worked with that company and was a vendor to them in the 90s and became a very serious advocate of hemp, carrying Jack Hare's book around everywhere I went, preaching,
did?
we have to legalize. I went really far in my beliefs that took me through decades of dealing with all types of aspects of the industry, ultimately to end up after the 2014 Farm Bill coming into the industry on the white or gray side, which it was kind of gray in 2014. We were in a pilot project. And I formed a company early on in 2016, which has evolved into what we all are today.
Okay.
And Jim is my father-in-law. He is retired. And he was a naysayer from day one. The first day I met Jim, I said, you all are going to drink your alcohol and I'm going to go out in your front yard and smoke my cannabis.
I love it.
And poor
I'm still
Jim.
working on my family.
Poor Jim. But he didn't understand it at that point in time. We've had many, many, many conversations, and he's watched what's happened with me and what's happened in our industry. And then Jim came in, and Jim should take the story from there.
Okay.
He is the real science behind what we do. I'm a dedicated servant and steward to the plant, but Jim has the credentials and the real scientific ability, which has brought us to where we are today. And we have the most incredible team in the industry, quite frankly. Jim is one of the pieces of it. He's a founder of it, but we have a lot of great people behind us. So
Sounds
Jim,
like
take
it.
it from there. So how is that? There's your intro. Jim.
That's perfect. Just perfect.
Sounds great. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, on my side, I guess I'll just give you a tad of background before I jumped into why I got into this. Initially, I had wanted to be a physician and was planning on that. I unfortunately was a little bit too lackadaisical during college days and ended up deciding also that research seemed much more interesting than what I was watching my medical student friends go through with their pretty much a lot of memorization. It's a very difficult field, a lot of information. And in the research side, it was discovering the way things work, which I thought, that's really kind of cool. I like this. So I stayed in the research side and got a Ph.D. degree. Taught in the medical school for about 10 years and then did a little agricultural biotechnology and also some biotechnology in a pharmaceutical company before I retired. And then when Keith started this business and he kept talking to me about what the cannabinoids would do, I just didn't believe it. I said, that's really a crock. And I said, I'll be happy to be a science advisor if and only if I can find some real science that describes this and not an anecdotal note from somebody who did something and felt such and such. Mm-hmm. And so if I find some science, I'll support it. Yeah, you. So I started to look into that. And I was shocked, frankly, the amount of work that had been done in Europe, Israel, not much in the U.S., of course, because of, the DEA rules, regulations. And I found things in both human and animal models that supported the concepts and the things that Keith was saying, giving a biochemical basis to why that may happen. When it's an animal model, that may or may not translate, but at least there's that information to say that in that model, cannabinoids do this. And so I became convinced of the value of these particular materials that way, that, delving into the science and seeing what was reported and what was done. And the realization hit me that it's a very unique plant with the materials that are part of it and that can be beneficial to man.
So I keep telling
got
Jim
into
that
it.
I believe this is our companion plant, that this plant is here with us as our companion through the journey in life, and that he's so surprised that it means so much to us, but it's only because it was taken away from us. Had it not been taken away from us, this plant would more than likely be growing in Jim's yard and everybody else's yard. And that's why we don't understand how much the relationship is. But Jim's been figuring it out through science. So sorry to interrupt. But.
No, it's quite all right. I mean, I was of the generation where this was really taboo. I mean, unless you were some kind of hippie, low life, whatever, that didn't really want to contribute. And so cannabis got a really bad name as an area you had to avoid, kind of thing.
Really?
And
in the medical studies
this
and
was just in a familial setting.
Correct.
This was
intentional.
It was socially and brought up to be taboo. If you are a good person, you don't get involved with this. That's the kind of thing it was. So, those habits are hard to break. I talked to a lot of people in my age bracket, and a lot of them are very nervous and won't try it. And I said, well, it's unfortunate that you're missing out on some of this, but there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah. I think, like I said, my family, there's members that are still, for one reason or another, not quite there yet. But yeah, it's tough.
Well, it's a tough hurdle. I mean, when you've had that many years of that drummed into your mind, doing 180 is a little bit difficult. I mean, I only did it because I'm a scientist and I saw the data. And that's the end of that. That's why I came around.
Well, they tell people this to ask, I think like with my mother, she wants to hear it from her doctor, but the doctors don't know. They don't. So that's really frustrating. She's like, I'll do it, when my doctor says it's okay. And, the doctor says, well,
Well, he or she, they're in a very difficult position though. They can't actively prescribe something that the FDA is still nervous about. It's a difficult situation. Yep. I mean, they have a little bit of leeway now with at least the approved drugs to offer something off label. But I don't know that many of them are interested there yet. I don't think they're there yet.
One of the things that our team does, and we've helped quite a bunch of people with this, and we act as a bridge between that fear and the true knowledge. And we bring that science forth. And then we have this one other thing that is really interesting is we have a leader of this organization, myself, who admits to daily use of the plant for over 4 decades. So when you speak to somebody who believes that the plant is so detrimental and you're a loser and you can't do business and you're not focused and all you would want to do is eat Doritos and lay on the couch all day, I'm exactly the opposite of that. I'm an incredibly hardworking guy who runs a team of some of the greatest professionals imaginable in any industry. And when they realize that, in fact, I have been using this on a daily basis for 4 decades, I, like my friends who we brought this industry up, discovered that this plant kept us balanced. We didn't realize, we had no idea why. We didn't have any idea why. We just knew that when we used it, we could survive. It was like closed to us for our minds and our bodies. And it allowed us to protect ourselves from our environment. And nobody understood that. They looked at us as if we were just a bunch of drug addicts trying to get high. But we all realize now that may be what it appeared to be, but it was much deeper. And the science today really is starting to show out how much deeper it was, that it was not drug abuse. It was actually doing the right thing for my body.
Isn't that funny?
Was doing it a different way, correct? And time has shown out. I'm turned 56 shortly here, and I don't use any pharmaceutical drugs of any kind. I don't take anything, and I'm in perfect health. And my contemporaries around me generally all look at me and go, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And I generally look back and say, well, I don't have a beer in my hand. And everywhere they go, they always entertain themselves by consuming alcohol,
Yep.
which I considered to degrade the body versus using the cannabis, which I used at the same time.
Well, let's not attack the alcohol now. Some of us,
Jim loves his alcohol, but I believe that. And I believe that the cannabis kept my body balanced. So just on that note, that's how I felt.
I think that's a key word, frankly, with this, Jill, is balance. This material restores and helps you maintain a nice homeostatic or balanced relationship in your body, so that when you encounter things, which is inevitable, it will help you deal with them. And it doesn't cure anything or any diseases. It just simply helps your body deal with what it has to deal with. That's really where it is, I think. And so it's really pretty neat,
Yeah, I guess taking it back to the medical system, it troubled me that when I learned about the endocannabinoid system, that it wasn't, a part of the medical system. And I've talked to all kinds of people, and I've heard, because of the organ-based nature of the way medicine is taught, it would require a complete rework of everything. But to me, it seems, I really hope that starts to happen more. And,
it's happening.
It's happening.
It's starting slowly.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some nice publications coming out about the endocannabinoid system being a target for intervention, for pharmaceutical intervention. They'll be slightly different than what we're doing, but at least the system is now being recognized for what it can contribute. So now the pharmaceutical companies, and this takes time. I mean, this endocannabinoid is relatively recent in things. It's only been maybe a decade or so, maybe a little bit more. But it now needs to go from the observational state to the experimental state to then working with particular chemicals that the pharmaceutical company would want to use to intervene in those. So it is a path, and it is going, and it will be there. It's just going to take a little time.
Yeah. So the difference between cannabis and pharmaceuticals, can you give a little idea why it's so? Is it because of the many cannabinoids within the whatever they're trying to bring to, like pharmaceuticals, they want them to be one substance, not like 6,500 cannabinoids. So
exactly. Well, that to a large degree is historical as well. I mean, the idea when you bring a drug up from the FDA is that every time you make it, every time you do it, it's the same.
Got to be the same.
And we know that when it goes out, the active is, let's just make some numbers up. The active is 98% active, and it's 2%. And we know exactly what that 2% is. And we know that when we give a 98% active with those 2% contaminants, that the outcome is what we want. And then you go back to production. Okay, the temperature went to, instead of 55 degrees, it went to 62 degrees. Does that affect the product? And if that affects the product, how is that manifested? So they have to go through a really very rigorous track to show this. And then the second problem with it is, we don't know how to do multivariable experiments. I mean, one can, statistically you can. The difficulty is that you have to have a very good quantifiable output. If you don't have that, trying to change a number of variables at one time and understand that interaction is not very successful. Hence, they say, okay, we'll simplify it. We will take one target and we will look at that. And again, I mean, in fairness to the pharmaceutical company, that's really about the only way to go right now. You don't know anything because you stop and think about what is it that impacts us taking a drug. Okay, so we have genetics and biochemistry. Yours and mine are different. You have the environment where you live. You know, we're both fortunate to live in a very nice environment. We don't live, where there's dioxin in the ground or, environmental hazards, or we're not breathing, fumes. What do we eat? What's our diet? And as a consequence of the diet is, what does that do to the microorganisms in our gut? All of which are playing together in a holistic way, which is ideal. That is clearly the goal.
Yep.
But we are a long, long way from that because we don't understand any of those systems I just told you. And they're all interlaced and interlocking. So in a way that, they just did what they could do. They could say, okay, We can identify fats with cardiovascular disease. All right, let's inhibit cholesterol. And they did it. And they've done a very nice job with that, so there are positives to that. And therein lies the difficulty with the plant. Because like you said, we're growing a plant in a field in Minnesota and Kentucky and Texas. Birds are on it. All sorts of stuff's going on. Water levels are different. So those individual components, not all of which have been identified, are probably rising and falling all over everywhere.
Yeah.
And so you say, how do I make that into a drug? How can I guarantee that every time it's the same? Can't do it.
No, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So
that was a beautiful explanation of that. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
That was really, really well done. Thank you.
So, really,
how do you go from anywhere from that?
I know. I'm looking at I'm like, okay, so what are the major? Well, tell me a little bit about your group and how you came together, and what kind of, with broad tones, what you're working on. Give me a little background.
I would love to do that. So, our group is awesome. There's more than a dozen of us. We have MDs, PhDs, retired military, Fulbright scholar, MBAs, and myself. And in that team, all of us are just dedicated to learning the science and bringing forth the education. Okay. So Dr. Jim and I are the co-inventors of a pending patent on what we call nature's delivery system. And Jim and I resolved a bypass over the liver's first pass metabolism. So I don't know if you've ever studied on bioavailability or the audience knows anything about bioavailability, but the magic to making all of this work is getting it into your body and getting it into your bloodstream. Right. If it doesn't make it into the bloodstream and throughout the body, you don't get the benefits of it.
And that's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem. So that's one of the things I specialize in is educating on bioavailability and ingestion methods, because every ingestion method is different, whether you smoke it or swallow it or rub it on your skin or whatever that ingestion method may be. They all carry different ways and pathways into the body. Mm-hmm. So our nature's delivery system is absolutely amazing. Jim's better at explaining it than I am on the technical terms, but in the simplest of terms, normally when you ingest something, it's processed through the liver. Mm-hmm. And the liver is where the conversion of oil to water takes place, and the liver cleanses out the toxins. And that's where a degradation of the active ingredients of all lipophilic compounds, all oil-based compounds take place. And I have been teaching and or preaching, whichever way you want to look at it, for a couple of years based on what I believe, based on the existing science, but it didn't exist, was a real number for ingestion. And it just came out about 6-8 weeks ago. Really? And I've been saying it runs between 4 and 20% on the low side, and it came out to be 6. So 6%.
I think I've read that somewhere recently.
Of THC. So that what that means that they didn't do the study on CBD, but they did get a valid THC ingestion number. And what that means is it's there's some big numbers going on here. So if you take 100 milligrams of THC, you only process 6 into your bloodstream that is actually used. Wow. So that means 16 times, or you're only getting 1/16 of what you're paying for when you ingest the product. And I can tell you the numbers on smoking, they're an incredible range. They go from 2% to 54%. So I know that sounds insane, but that is because some people pretend to smoke. They don't actually bring it into their lungs. They don't do the cough. Doing studies. Correct. And then you have the long-term cannabis users who know what they get when they suck it in real deep and hold it. So those people, when studied, push the numbers up really high, all the way up into the 50 plus. Okay. So that's the science that we've been working on, is how do we deliver the products properly? Okay. And we solve that with nature's delivery system. We have a variety of products and brands that flow from that. One of them is I love Hemp Mellow.
Hemp Mellow.
So
It's a great
Hemp
name.
Mellow, yes. Hemp Mellow was a leverage of that technology.
Okay.
So it's the highest legal THC amount for hemp. We bring it in at 0.29. The legal limit is 0.3.
Yep.
So we skirt right under that legal limit at 0.29. And because our bioavailability is so good, we actually deliver real relaxation via hemp-based THC and cannabinoids that people can feel. And the Hemp Mellow has been a great product during this last few months or 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody needed it. So all our friends and family, people that knew about it, really hit off well. We had another product line called Overcome.
Okay.
And that is based on Lyme disease. One of our founders, Annie Rouse, started her journey for medicines because of Lyme disease.
Okay.
So she was looking for a way to overcome mental, physical, and emotional stresses that are all a result of being bit by a tick. So
wow.
I know, can you imagine?
That's just, that Lyme disease is just nuts.
So,
it's a toughie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real tough one. And that's really what brought Annie into our lives because of our technology. Annie was looking to make the products she was developing better. And that was ultimately what what bound us together. So the Overcome brand is developing all kinds of really wonderful products. And then Hemp Mellow is a singularly based, highest THC level, legal, most relaxing product that we can basically create on a legal basis using hemp.
That's pretty cool.
It is, yeah. And then our team's doing all kinds of stuff. We've sent hemp to space. So we've actually been on the International Space Station with our
So what
hemp.
was the reason? Why did you do that?
Well, it's not me. Annie is a part of a project that is studying the effects of a zero gravity on the expression of cannabinoids.
Okay.
So in order to do that, we had to get to space, and we have accomplished that.
Wow.
And the team is working on really deep medical research. We're moving into high-level clinical studies and trials to understand the technology we've created with nature's delivery system. And once we have that all together, we'll be moving forward into actually looking at what we can do with the products we can make.
Okay.
So I'm super excited. We have the best team of people working on this.
Yeah, I can feel that. It seems like a really positive vibe that I got from you guys from the beginning. So
the place that I'm sitting at right now is just amazing.
Yeah.
So absolutely amazing. I'm sitting at a state-of-the-art facility for manufacturing that is completely certified, even certified for milk, which are allergens, which is a whole nother certification level when you're talking about the FDA. Because when you have things that people for allergens is what they're called.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in an allergen certified facility. And this is amazing to be manufacturing at this level. Even our flooring is pharmaceutical manufacturing flooring.
Wow.
We have ozonators and things to clean the rooms that do it with fog. It's an amazing facility, all LED lights, and at one point we'll be almost carbon neutral here. It was also designed completely with the environment in mind.
Wow.
So we're just so blessed with everything, right down to our manufacturing partners.
That's
really pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the products that are out there, can you guys, somebody tell me a little bit why there's such variability and, just for people listening, like what to look for when you're looking for a CBD product and why there's so many that are just not effective. Because, I guess what I've experienced is, CBD, some products are like, well, it might be helping, it might not, it's hard for people to assess how it's affecting them. And
you want to grab the first portion of that, Jim?
Yeah.
I know you know the answer.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there are several things I guess we could touch on.
Sure.
Yeah.
One I alluded to before, which is everybody's individual biochemistry and genetics varies. Mm-hmm. So what happens when you consume it to a large degree is your particular makeup. That's certainly one. The bigger one that I've seen, and again, I'm a little new in this, but a lot of the products are are not what they claim. So that I've been in stores where it'll say CBD on the bottle and you read the ingredients and it's hemp seed oil, which,
Oh, yeah.
you'd be hard pressed to find the CBD there. I mean, true, there's something there, but the effectiveness is not. The third one is that I'd always warn your listeners about is if they're going to buy a product, make sure they get a certificate of analysis showing what that product contains.
Mm-hmm. So
and if they can't get it, then walk away. And as far
Absolutely.
as whatever you may want to do, so someone may want to take it for pain.
Mm-hmm.
What is the level of pain? Like I take it for arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I use. I have no cartilage in, one of these joints. So it's painful. And what this thing does is that it gets me down to a state where I don't notice it. I wouldn't say it feels gone. This one doesn't feel exactly like this, but I don't notice it, as much. If I don't take some CBD, it will start to hurt. And that's one where the source is always going to be there because I don't have any cartilage. So that irritation is always going to be there.
Yep.
Now, someone may come in and they may have that. They always tell you, well, start low, see what the level is going to be. When I look at the research mainly on animal studies, starting low is probably about 20 mgs to 25 mgs a shot. Very few people will do that. You'll buy a lot of these things that are 5 or 10 milligrams. And I'm afraid that some portion of the population, well, that didn't work, but they took such a small amount.
Right.
And if the material is like an oil, as Keith was alluding to, then that 5 becomes now 0.3 or even less than that. So you have to be a little bit careful about the quality of the product you get, ensure, and you don't know too much about your own personal thing without trial and error. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an empirical thing. Some people are very sensitive to THC, for instance. Some people aren't. So you sort of have to figure that one out yourself to some degree.
Right.
The other thing that has bothered me a little bit is people say, well, you need to take it for a month or two for it to work. And I'm saying, I wouldn't go there because it sounds to me like they're trying to get your money. If you have to sign up for a 2-month supply to find out if it works. But again, it depends on what you're going after. I have someone who is taking it for MS, and that was noticed in 2 days.
Wow.
An impact of what I had given her in that period of time.
So the dosage and the
dosage
having
is really
the quality,
key.
the testing.
And to give you an idea, the people with epilepsy are taking between 1 and 2 grams a day.
Right.
So that's 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day.
That's like a bottle.
It's a bottle.
A bottle
That's a full. So Jim just tackled the first part of that question.
Okay.
There's also a second part to the answer to that question. I was hoping he would hit everything, and you got it, nailed it. So exactly what that side of the industry. So we also have our industry people and the products that are being put out into the industry, where Jim touched on it with the certificate of analysis, but it goes much further. So we have people that have come to the industry to just make a buck, and many of them formulated products that had no intention behind the products and no skill or math or science.
People think it's easy.
Correct. And they would take a CBD isolate, which has lowered in price tremendously over time and made it very accessible. And that isolate can be blended with anything. And you can put it in food and coffee and tea and tinctures and anything. And they turn that into what they call a CBD product. Now, I can tell you the last time I made a product, I went out and searched out 5 unique cultivars, which all had major expressions. And I put those together to make the product that I made. So when people say, well, how come your products work and the other stuff I used didn't? Well, that's a fundamental thing is we look at this plant as each of the cannabinoids being a key that unlocks some potential in your body to help regulate itself. And your body is filled with many, many different locks. So
I've never heard that. It said that way.
So if we put more keys in the toolbox, that's the product that you're ingesting, the likelihood that one of the keys that wasn't there in another bottle will be the key that you need, or a combination of keys is what's required to bring homeostasis to you individually based on all of the factors that Jim just brought up, because that's what really counts. Add in delivering the product, because you're down to 6%.
Right.
We're doing trials on nature's delivery system, but we're looking at a minimum of, in our eyes, a 5-fold increase.
Wow.
So that would be 30%. We don't know, and we're not going to make a claim until we can scientifically validate it. But that's what we guess based on working with it for years, that it's at least 5-fold. That's why I can bring relaxation at 0.29 hemp, which shouldn't do that, because we're delivering it so well.
Wow.
But that is the second part to the answer to the question, is all of the things that Jim said, and then add in an industry, which there are some, and don't get me wrong, there are some great companies making really great products that are really dedicated to what they're doing, but there's a lot that aren't. And many of them, they just didn't understand the plant or what to do. They just heard 3 letters, we can do this, let's go. And therein lies many of the differences as to the products, because you'll oftentimes find a little craft guy who makes an exceptional product because he works with the plant. He understands it.
Yeah, so, that's the formulator we're working with is like that.
Sets companies apart too. It's not just the science, but it's an understanding of the plant. And that's why all the doctors are necessary, but people like Annie and myself who have got decades of time invested into experience, we already know what all these studies are putting out. We've already seen it, experienced it. We know. Correct.
Yeah.
And
that's so important. You know, I would like to highlight that, because that's one thing I didn't understand until I came into the industry. Just, you know, the people that have been in the industry, the depth of knowledge that they have, and like being around people that have had used it for different things, and just, you know, experiment, trial and error, and just there's just this huge amount of knowledge that we come in, like I'm come in to the industry, or just even to using cannabis fairly recently, and you want to think you know everything, and it's like been an experience of learning how very little I know, and pretty much how little what I'm surprised about is someone, Keith, like you, that isn't necessarily the head of Mass General or whatever, but has more knowledge than probably 85% of the doctors, because you've been, grassroots, boots on the ground type experience. And that I'm blown away by, first of all, by the people that think they know stuff and how annoying that is. And just the amazing amount of knowledge that the OG that people have, that have been, working with people that are over like MS or something like that, you're dealing with like.
Truly, you're so right. And I know people much more than myself who earned it like I couldn't even express, who risked their lives, their families, their everything to make medicine to give away. That's what we all did. So that's where the knowledge came from. It was from trial and error with people who were at the end of their rope and were willing to go out of society for help. And the people were there working on this. Have been working on it for 50 plus years.
Yeah, out of society. I mean, it takes a lot of risk. And I mean, now I take for granted the fact that it's legal in my state, that people that have died for the plant. And
well, speaking of, let's bring up that point.
Sure.
There's an organization called the Last Prisoner Project.
Yeah.
Steve and Andrew D'Angelo founded it, and we are big supporters of that. The premise behind the Last Prisoner Project is that there are people still sitting in jail today for upwards of life for non-violent cannabis offenses, getting caught either possessing or selling cannabis. And meanwhile, we're out here doing science and putting our products into commerce, and people are sitting in jail for selling the wrong person an ounce of cannabis. And that could have been 25 years ago, and they're still sitting in jail. With COVID, many of these people are sitting in jail and even getting sick. So if any of your listeners could understand how much sacrifice has been put into this and maybe donate something to the Last Prisoner Project to help, what we do is fund the legal authority and bring in the celebrity power. We were literally on late night television with Seth Meyers just a couple of weeks ago.
Were you really?
And Jim,
cool.
Yes, and not myself. Seth Meyers was talking with, I think, Jim Belushi. And Jim Belushi joined the Last Prisoner Project. And it's really about helping those people who still sit in jail today for the crime of something that we do for a living and that we're all freely enacting it. So just wanted to throw that out.
No, thank you. I can't say enough. It's just the cognitive dissonance that you have to hold on to like think about that.
Well, they're doing an incredible job.
Good.
I'm not a part of it. They're just my friends, but I support it 100%.
Yeah.
And whenever I get the opportunity to reach an audience, I'd like the audience to know that. Thank you.
I just have a few more questions. What has been the biggest roadblocks to getting your company off the ground? And
there are a couple of roadblocks that just never seem to end. That's government and regulatory and financing.
Yeah. Okay.
They're always there.
That's pretty typical.
The rules just changed 2 weeks ago with the DEA. They made new rules about crude extract, which is something that manufacturers deal with. Mm-hmm. And here we are 2 years into legalization, completely off of the Controlled Substance Act. And the DEA says, we're going to bring it back. So there is a continuous flow of regulatory challenges, that will never go away, in my opinion. The bigger issue, though, in what I've seen is companies just like ours that have good science and want to move forward. We're very difficult to find for the proper investors, and the investment money that's out there is just being wasted. I've watched millions of dollars just get flushed because of not knowing where people were going and not having a path or a direction. Mm-hmm. While I've seen people with great paths and directions not be able to get it done.
Wow,
and there's a lot of disparity in because people don't know. Everyone feels like our industry is filled with a bunch of, I'm the best, and no one can figure out what's really true. So that's one of the things that I've said. If I was to point out anything, I've seen investors throw away tons of money on ideas that have no value that I can see in seconds looking at the plan, yet they see money. And then a good plan that they can't see because it's a long-term plan about building something in science and development. Most people can't see that because it doesn't have that green rush effect to it. So I'm hoping that that'll change. The pharmaceutical companies know it, but private investors and, friends and family, that kind of thing, that's the only thing that's available to small companies like ours. We're not a giant company.
Right.
So we're very fortunate, but we're not funded and we're not on any public stock exchange.
Well, I think that what you guys are doing is going to get I don't know. It seems like a good time to be more of an awareness of social good in investing and like impact investing.
Well, see, we would be able to get to those communities, but we're barred or banned from Facebook and all of the fundraising sites. We're not allowed to participate in them. We're banned from doing any advertising at all. So that's the problem.
Yep,
is that unless you're in position, correct. And that's the underlying problem is we can't get our word out. So I could speak on a podcast because we're allowed to do this with free speech. But if I try to put this and advertise it, I'm blocked from advertising.
Right.
So therein lies part of the problem. I know. I see you shaking your head. Like,
well, we're just going through some of this. Yeah. I had no idea. How hard it was going to just be to get a payment processor and then they're checking your website, they're checking your social media accounts and like things that it just seems like my head spins around full circle on my head when I think about just the craziness of the fact that this is a plant that's saving lives that I'm seeing personally transform individuals that I know, and yet we can't even like put anything on Facebook about, yeah, I know I'm beating a dead
You
horse.
get it, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. And we're in those same obstacles. Just, imagine trying to get to the investment community with those obstacles in front of you too. So to
Yeah.
get to valid people who would understand what you were doing versus, because, companies like ours and the people who are really doing this, they don't want to partner with people who are just here for the money. We all have an intention that we're
Yeah.
doing. And Jim's all on. We're here to help people. I didn't hear Jim say, but Jim's really happy because he's helping people for real.
Are you?
Well, yeah, I guess I glossed over that, but all the years working at Glaxo and Monsanto is more agricultural and food. But in any case, I wasn't bringing any products to market that would directly have an impact that CBD and hemp oil has had in the few years I've been doing it. I mean, it's just really amazing to think that making some things up in the lab for people to try, and they keep coming back telling me what a difference it's made. I mean, it's really humbling. I mean, it just really feels good to know that this stuff affects the quality of people's lives. I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to struggle so to get that out, but I guess it is what it is at this particular point in time.
It is, and I'll tell
That's
you,
right. That's why we're doing podcasts.
Yeah.
If you tried to do this in the 80s, we'd all be in jail right now.
We'd all be in jail. That's right.
Yeah, just for talking.
On the bright side.
We've come a really long way. That's my point.
Yeah.
And we've come a really long way that we can have this conversation.
Yep.
I don't have any fear that there will be any retribution that, I have used cannabis for 4 decades and, we're moving forward. So we're in a great position. All we need to do is educate people and get out to the public.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So the last question, how do you see it revolutionizing the healthcare industry?
Well, in my opinion, I think there's a couple of things going to happen. Number one, the point I alluded to before, where the companies are now looking at the endocannabinoid system, trying to understand its role in health. So what will happen from there is the pharmaceutical will do what it has done thus far, which is get an isolated compound, have it for a specific application, and go for that. The difference with the cannabinoids, pharmaceutical focuses on generally one enzymatic reaction. It's one thing they could control. CBD and hemp is more widespread and global. So they're going to, and this will be tricky for them because they'll have to fish through there to find out the winners that they want to pull out. The difficulty and the problem for the pharmaceutical company is, where's their patent position? Where are they going to find something if they make this really nice thing and OP Innovates or your company says, well, here you can buy this thing, which is actually better than what they're making for less than that. So there's a tricky thing the pharmaceuticals are going to have to deal with. I mean, the reality is that these are good things. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get into it. Second reality is GW Pharmaceuticals almost has the patent estates on a lot of this, so they got to pay some royalties. And then the third thing is the entourage effect of what we give them. The entourage effect meaning the influence of the whole oil, the whole oil, not just a specific component.
They work together.
It does work together, and in a very high percentage. I think the GW pharmaceutical publication was something in the vicinity of 70% of what they looked at with an isolate could be enhanced by the full oil. Now, what they'll do, of course, is say, okay, well, what's in that full oil that's supplementing that? And that may be the niche that they'll follow. Mm-hmm. And it would make sense. I mean, I think there are a lot of good things that could come out of that. But again, it'll be sort of targeted for one thing.
Right.
And I like to think at the end of the day, you may find a situation where the oil will go in hand with a specific compound. I mean, if you take the epilepsy example, for instance, the CBD would drop the level of what would be required for an anti-epileptic drug. Mm-hmm. So then all the associated side effects and adverse events of that drug will then drop down significantly. So you may find a couple which will be enhanced as you mix these together. Whether they'll ever really mix the oils, that's really going to be tricky, because that's a whole new world that they'd have to deal with and how they actually control that.
Yeah.
But, science is never ending. It's continually evolving. They're finding new ways to do things. If some of these things get identified, they, maybe get 10, 20, 30 of them together, and they can make that individually, put it together, and that's a product.
Yeah.
That's where the pharmaceutical company, at least with respect to cannabinoids, would almost have to go.
That's
either
interesting.
Strictly isolate or finding out what's in that entourage effect that specifically is interacting, put those together, one or two components, and then that becomes your drug. And the nice part about that too is that the adverse event profile drops dramatically. Oh my God. The safety of this stuff is really amazing. The only problems, and I wouldn't really even call them problems, but the only interactions I see are with people who have or are taking pharmaceuticals on one hand and now are taking hemp. But even there, when you really delve into the data, I mean, my God, you have to take so much CBD or hemp to actually bring out an effect that from a clinical perspective, it may not be that significant or that relevant. But all those have to be tested individually to make sure that, and I say that to people all the time. I say, if you're going to take this, I don't want to be intrusive and tell me what drugs are you taking, but I said, if you're going to your physician, you're taking some medications. If you tell me what they are, I'll look up the science and you take it to your doctor, which is what I usually do. And I say, here are the papers. Hopefully they've looked at them. I had one fellow who had a blood thinner, and he was worried about it. Yeah, it's very scary. But you look at the data again, and you would have to literally be taking, if it was warfarin, for instance, grams a day.
Okay.
And even if that you were forced to that level, if the physician now knows the warfarin level drops, because that may be maintained in blood longer when you have that much CBD, it can be accommodated.
Right.
You still could do what you need to do.
So you can work with it.
You can work with it. Yeah, I think there were publications that came out, and I was warned not to get too geeky by my colleague. So I will only tell you about the one system. It's in the liver. I mean, that's what the liver does. It takes and gets rid of all bad things that come through the body. And so that's how they break down. You give warfarin, that's rat poison. They give it in the body to control that. And that's how it gets broken down in the liver. And a lot of these other drugs, the anti-epileptic drugs, clobazam, all go through the cytochrome P450 system, they call it.
P450. Yep.
Yeah. They're the cleanup enzymes. They get rid of the bad guys and try to help get everything excreted. And CBD goes through there as well as some other cannabinoids. But all those things, come together, and there are publications say, oh my God, CBD inhibits the cannabinoid enzymes. Okay, it's an in vitro assay. How does that work actually in somebody? You know what I mean?
Right.
And some studies have been done on it, but there's when you find out by the time you get there, you are really talking about substantial amounts of CBD that one has to consume to have an impact. And that's generally over a fairly substantial or long period of time. So, the devil's in the details there. You need to know when they say it's going to cause you a problem, what were the conditions they used to cause that problem?
Yeah.
And then just slip back.
Wow.
I'll follow that up with Jim, that we're working with what the head of the DEA once called the safest botanical substance on earth. So
really? The head of the
DEA called it the
was
safest.
Was that like a Freudian slip or something?
No, it wasn't. It was in a court case. And at one point, the head of the DEA believed that cannabis should not be on Schedule 1. And of course, he's no longer the head, but
right, of course not.
The science behind this is, as far as we know in all of recorded history, no one has ever died from consuming cannabis. So we are looking at literally the safest compound that we could be playing with, because water itself kills people. If you drink too much water, you can die. But we have no recorded history of anyone consuming enough cannabis to kill them. So just if your listeners could keep that in mind, what we're talking about in all of recorded history.
All of recorded.
So,
I know.
And that's,
let it sink in.
yes. So that you can't even say that about water.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about. That's why my argument is that this plant is our companion plant. It's supposed to be here with us.
Right.
So, and the studies have shown that we won't even ingest enough to hurt ourselves. So our bodies say that's enough, and our minds we don't take anymore.
Right. Or
so
we go to sleep.
That we even self-regulate. So I just wanted to point that out, how safe this plant truly is.
Thank you.
All those levels, at least in my experience and opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot of publications that have said exactly what Keith said. A lot of good scientific publications where that's their conclusion. It's a very safe compound. The one thing I just, in last, I know we're going to close in a minute, but to alert your audience that you really have to be careful with, the real short blurb. CBD inhibits P450. Grapefruit juice is bad for you, when you take drugs. You need to get down and delve into the actual publication to find out what's going on. And the grapefruit juice just popped into my mind because they would tell you about statins if you were taking that. Well, when you look at the papers, these people were drinking a liter and a half, which is a Coke bottle, a liter bottle of Coke, another, 3 times a day for a couple of days. I mean, who would do that? Would drink concentrated grapefruit. I mean, what?
Nobody. It's not a normal circumstance.
Exactly. And I think some of these things, what the pharmaceutical industry has to do from a regulatory perspective, they push the limit out to find out what will happen.
Worst case scenario.
Exactly. Then someone will publish, grapefruit juice, blah, yada, or P450, blah, yada, because, the system was pushed to such a level that you found a result. But as Keith said, you can do that with anything. Yeah. You push it far enough, you're going to find something.
Cannabis.
Except cannabis. There you go. But anyways, I'll leave you with that note. So we'll do that. Except cannabis.
Yep, that's pretty good. Note. Yep. Hey, So thank you guys for doing this.
More than welcome.
Where can we find you? So your websites are.
We're out there. So I'll throw a few out, but the simple ones are Hemp Mellow.
Hemp
That's
Mellow.
The simplest place. OP and Me. We have a survey there for our products where if you use our products, you can tell us how it affected you. We have an actual survey, a very in-depth one.
Nice.
So we take responses. We have QR codes on our products that bring you to that OP and Me for that. It's opinnovates.com, opandme.com, hempmellow.com.
Wow.
overcomeeveryday.com, and a great informational site which Annie built called Think Hempy Thoughts.
Think Hempy Thoughts.
Think Hempy Thoughts.
I love it.
I'll leave everyone with that.
Okay.
That's a launch place to all of those sites I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
There's a wonderful amount of information on there for people who'd like to learn about hemp or cannabis from our educational works. This will eventually be included in there of an educational talk that we have done. So Think Hempy Thoughts will get you to most of the things that we do and give you a good start of our group. And we really appreciate you taking the time with us
Jill,
as well today, Jill.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you guys were great.
Thank you so much. So thank you, Jill.
Looks like you're having fun. All right. Take care, guys.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Jill.
All right.
That is a wrap, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. Dr. Jim Kane and Keith Butler, weren't they fantastic? Again, stay tuned for TSC Talks weekly updates. More exciting guests coming down the line with Tiffany Watkins, Lady Canna, Catherine Caulfield, Quantum Freedom, Spiritual Guide. We have some guests coming up on psychedelic medicine, psychedelic coaching, microdosing, more green nurses, more educators. So stay tuned, hold on, and keep tuning in to TSC Talks.